TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift freshman sire Jimmy Creed, the brilliant Grade 1 winner by Distorted Humor, whose first 2-year-old winner recently equaled a Gulfstream Park track record in his debut.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, Kentucky Derby 143 is in the books. I tell you, man, it looked a little bit nerve-wracking. I thought it was going to be cold, going to be wet. Friday was a complete washout. But man, the sun popped out, and I thought the track actually held up really good.
Oh, it's cold Friday. I can promise you that. But yeah, it's a good thing that the rain tracked out, midday Saturday, John, and that sun came out. And the track, one reason we didn't talk about the weather all that much last week in the show was, A, I didn't think anybody moved way up. I didn't think anybody moved way down, any of the top contenders. But you never know how that track at Churchill is going to play. I mean, we saw two different tracks between Oaks race and the Derby. Weather was a factor on both. We saw more of a sloppy, sticky type track, I think, in the Oaks, and we saw a fast pace that melted down. The horse that was dead last and the one that was next to last, essentially in the far turn came swooping down that long stretch and ran 1-2. The Kentucky Derby is totally different. That race baked in the sun. I think they ran a dirt race, around 5 o'clock. They sealed it. Okay, they had the long post time up to the Woodford turf, ran that on the turf, had another long post time. So almost 2 hours, they multiple times they sealed and floated that racetrack. That moisture was getting less and less. They were packing that clay down. The sun was baking the top of it. I just really felt good about Always Dreaming and how speed would hold in that race, particularly knowing that there wasn't a lot of pace signed on in the first place.
Well, I'll tell you who the sun was really shining on. The sun was shining on Terry Finley with West Point Thoroughbreds, and we're really proud to welcome him to the show. Hey, Terry, thank you so much for coming on TCI.
Always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
Terry, we knew Always Dreaming would be aggressively ridden out of the gate. Speed is his weapon. So we figured, he'd be on the lead or at least close to it going on that first turn. They come out of the first turn, and they throw up that half-mile fraction of 46-2. And you see Johnny take State of Honor down the backstretch. And at the time, that was a confident move, in my opinion, for Johnny to feel that good despite going that fast for the first half mile. How did you feel?
You feel pretty good, right? Because, Johnny's not going to misjudge a pace because he's a Hall of Famer, and he's been doing it a little while. So when he engaged, I was like, that is a very, very good sign. And, what he basically did was he took it to them, he pressed, and he went all in, just like when you see poker and when a guy's got a great hand. And we had a great hand at the half-mile pole. Johnny went all in, and he won the hand. So it was a very, very, reassuring thing when he pressed the pedal down the backside.
So, Terry, you've been in horse racing now for a long time. I just want to know, what were you feeling when at the quarter pole you see your horse doing well, he's the horse to catch down the stretch? What were you thinking when it's like, hey, we're about to win the Kentucky Derby?
It's a feeling I'll never forget, and I thought we were in a good spot at the quarter pole, and when I saw him, change leads and just accelerate and put some distance between the horses that were running second and third, I said, oh my God, about 3 or 4 times, because we're going to win the Kentucky Derby. So I thought about a lot of different things in a very short period of time. Let me say that.
Well, Terry, one thing about Always Dreaming is he came into the Derby fresh, right? He was a fresh horse. We talked about that a little bit, and I think maybe even he ran his best race coming out of the Florida Derby in the Kentucky Derby. So now, coming back, that second race in 2 weeks, having to go on the road off such a big performance, I think it's well documented by now. This colt is not the biggest colt out there. He's not the big strapping type colt. So what are you guys doing, or what are you seeing in terms of his training, the way he's shipped into Baltimore, the way he's come out of this race that either gives you confidence or maybe is a concern going into the Preakness?
We're seeing all the right signs. I just talked to Vinny Viola. He flew down. Todd and he and the Bonomos flew down yesterday to see this horse train today. Always Dreaming train today in Baltimore. So he was very happy. He was overjoyed, with his demeanor and the way he moved across the racetrack. We're getting all the right signs, but we know that's an issue. 2 weeks after such a big performance in the Derby, we hope that it doesn't, quite affect him as much as it has, some other Derby winners in the past. But we're not going to worry about that. we think we're going there with the best horse, and we hope we get a good trip, and we hope we don't get unlucky. And if all those things happen, we'll be in a pretty good spot.
Well, Terry, you mentioned the best horse. Classic Empire, the 2-year-old champion, obviously did not have a good trip in the Derby, but Mark Casse clearly felt like Always Dream was the horse to beat, in my opinion, based on comments and based on the way State of Honor was aggressively ridden early in that race. Probably going to feel the same way now with Classic Empire coming into the Preakness Stakes, to where in a shorter field of 14, you can bet he's probably going to follow Johnny V's every move and really be on top of Always Dreaming. Tell me, do you view Classic Empire as, sort of the horse to beat for you all in this race? And if not, who do you think is the horse to beat?
No, he's the main horse on all of our mind, because we know he ran really, really well in the Kentucky Derby. Just take away the start, I mean, he's a lot closer to us. And Guinevere is the other horse. He didn't have a great trip, but he showed some run. And obviously he's got a lot of talent. Mark Casse, he's a cagey veteran. He knows the game, and he's been around horses like this in the past. So you can never discount a Team Casse horse, and we're not. But you know what? It'll be a 10 or 11 horse field, and every one of them has earned the right to run in the Preakness. So if they have a great day and we don't have at least a good day, we won't get to the wire first, and that's okay. That's why we run around the racetrack.
Well, Terry, again, thank you so much for coming in. I know you're busy. You got a lot to talk about. We want to thank you so much. You've been such a big supporter of TCI. We wish you and your partners the best of luck going into the Preakness.
Awesome. I hope we get a shot to talk after the Preakness when we go to the Big Apple with a Triple Crown on the line. But we do have a big assignment next Saturday to take care of, and I can tell you that's our focus.
So Joel, that's Terry Finley there with West Point Thoroughbreds. Done a lot of good things in this industry. It's exciting to see them win their first Kentucky Derby. Let's go to the Kentucky Derby now, and let's look at the break. It's such an important part of this race. Probably the most important break of any race in North America. So take me there and show me what happened to some of the key contenders.
I would definitely say you're right. I mean, anytime you get 20 horses in the gate like the Derby, that's going to be the case. Now, what you didn't see here is the Godolphin horse breaking poorly. And ironically, the one horse is usually the one that gets the worst trip. It creates a nice little gap for Looking at Lee here.
Yeah.
He just hugs the rail, never really comes into contact with any horse, and it's because the 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all tactical horses. You see the 3, Fast and Accurate, he couldn't even make the lead in there. So that really created a nice pocket for Corey Lannery and Looking at Lee, and it paid dividends in the end. He was the trip horse in this Kentucky Derby. Now, horses that took the worst of it, you see Classic Empire back here.
Yeah.
He's not in the spot where he wants to be. And what happened there with the break, and I'm going to pin this a little bit on Rajiv Mirage, it was clear they wanted a flyer out of the gate with Irish War Cry, the 17th gate. Clearly wanted to make a good earnest run in that first turn so he could sort of mirror Always Dreaming, stay in the clear on the outside. That's what this horse has become accustomed to. Well, unfortunately, he forgot to steer a little bit. The horse veered in left, cut off, Tappert. McCracken obviously took the brunt of it as well, came out with puncture wounds. And then the 14 and the 15 horse, McCracken and Classic Empire, a horse that really took it tough the first 100 yards out of the gate, John. It was shuffled back so much and out of the race. And really, that's what I'm more concerned about. Not really that they get banged around, but they lose so much position.
Yeah.
In a race to where they're getting over the top of the racetrack, Always Dreaming goes on with it, and even Battle of Midway's up there close and goes on with it, and Looking at Lee trips out. How are you going to make up the ground and beat a horse like Always Dreaming that's on top of his game on a track where the speed's not slowing down if you're shuffled that far back because of an adventurous start? So disappointing there to see the 17 horse come over and really cause all those problems. But look, we see it every year in the Derby.
Well, it's like you said, you lose position, you can lose your stride. But one of the other things that maybe the viewers don't understand is that, it can knock the wind out of these horses. They're coming out of there and they're about to run a dead sprint to get to that first turn. Yeah. It'd be like someone says, hey, on your mark, get set, go, and punch you right in the stomach coming right out of the gate.
It's rough, man.
It's a lot of force coming out of there.
A lot of horses come out injured, most of it's superficial type stuff.
Right.
But, Classic Empire came out with basically his eye was, extremely swollen like he'd been in a prize fight. So, we hear that every year to where that occurs. It just so happened occurred here with, unfortunately, 3 or 4 horses that were probably very live in the race, the 4 that I mentioned, and it was all initiated by Rajiv, with 17 horse.
All right, well, we talked a little bit with Terry, talking about on the back stretch, talking about the half mile. I want to go to the top of the stretch now in the Kentucky Derby. That stretch run is so long. People think they're going to win, and every year there's always horses that back up. Always Dreamin' looked great, though, coming down the stretch. But tell me about a few of the other horses coming down there.
Yeah, let's go the stretch run now here, and I'm pretty confident at this point. Switches lead on cues and goes on with it. The horse I was watching at the quarter pole was Rajiv Mirage, again on Irish War Cry.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have looked around 3 or 4 times like he was loaded with horse, and you see him empty out there, really has nothing for the finish. Looking at Lee, gets that golden trip up the rail, comes running here. Battle of Midway was all in at the quarter pole, and look, he still kicks on for 3rd. Yeah. So big race for Battle of Midway. I think that also shows that speed held on here. You saw Classic Empire there really making a good earnest account of himself despite all that trouble to come rally and showed his class there. I think Classic Empire ran the 2nd best race in the Kentucky Derby, and even some other horses that notably ran well. Practical Joke, I'm going to give the horse credit. I wanted to throw him out. Again, he flattened out that final 16th of a mile. It was clear he flattened out. But boy, how much class does he have to show that sort of run in here. Even Gunnevera came running a little bit in here despite not getting the pace set up here. So I think some colts made some solid accounts for themselves in this race. But for me, it was Always Dreamin', and then Classic Empire was the 2nd best.
All right, well, let's look at the TCI top 10 going into the Preakness, and let me know what you think. We got 11 horses in there, but we got a TCI top 10, so someone's not getting on there.
It starts with those 2 horses, John. Always Dreamin', Classic Empire, and then everybody else underneath that. Always Dreamin', you got to like the Derby champ back in 2 weeks. Classic Empire, this will be his third race in 5 weeks. Shipping to Arkansas, back to Churchill, now to Pimlico. So you worry about maybe if he's on top of his game, like I said, but he has so much class. And again, Mark Casse, the way they rode State of Honor out of there in the Derby, I think it's very clear. He knows Always Dreamin' is the horse to beat. Classic Empire's tactical enough. That is the race within the race, in my opinion. How aggressive Julian gets following Johnny's every move around Pimlico. And then, I think Gunnevera, again, just on class, I'll put him in the 3 spot, but you see a bunch of closer. I mean, these are one-run type horses. They really need Always Dreamin' of Classic Empire to engage and back up. And that typically doesn't happen at Pimlico. Conquest Mo Money, I'm putting him in the 4 spot because he's coming in fresh, and he is the pace of the race. He's the race. He's the horse that is probably going to make most of the calls in here, and that Johnny's going to have to try to engage at some point on the front end. And then even Royal Mo, nice horse, comes in fresh. And look, I'm upgrading the Santa Anita Derby in my mind, just based on the way Battle of Midway ran. Even Gormley, I thought, made a nice move in the Derby. So that Santa Anita form looks like it might be okay for this crop. My problem with him is he's a one-pace type horse, and it's hard for me to see a horse, that is tactical like him, finding a way to match styles with the Kentucky Derby winner, Always Dreamin'. To me, I just don't think he's quite good enough. So in my opinion, if I wanted a meltdown type scenario where Always Dreamin' and Classic Empire's not in there, then Royal Mo's not going to be in there, and that's going to set it up for a closer. If not, I see Always Dreamin' really skipping away from Royal Mo without a problem.
Well, thank you, Joe. I look forward next week to kind of breaking down all these horses, talking about them, learning more about their styles, how you see the Preakness sizing up. It was fun covering the Kentucky Derby.
Early weather forecast is clear.
Well, that's nice because last year it looked like a typhoon over there. Well, thank you guys for watching this week. Make sure you come back next week. As we mentioned, we're going to talk a lot more about these Preakness contenders and who we think will win this year's Preakness Stakes.